Welcome to Live, Life Inspired Views for Every Day. My name is Chris Meyer, and I'm a curious soul. For many years, I was a volunteer on the ambulance service. It wasn't unusual on Christmas to be called to the home of an older person living alone, complaining of terrible pains and insisting that we transport them to the emergency room. Many ambulance services refer to these kinds of calls as at Christmas as suitcase calls or other such names because the older single person, when loaded on the gurney, will often say, My suitcase is at the door. Their illness is easy to diagnose. Loneliness. Hmm. I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. This profound statement was in the Christmas letter penned by our dear friend and former pastor, Ole Winter. Ole is 96 years old and lives in an assisted living facility in Iowa. His entire family lives in Colorado, Arizona, and California, even Switzerland. So, how does it come to be that with family far away, his beloved wife Naomi no longer living, that he can make that bold statement? I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. So, I called Ole. If you want to be inspired, call Ole. When I asked him to tell me more about that statement, he said, I think it goes back to my childhood. You see, Ole was born 6 years after his sister. His parents were farmers and were immigrants from northern Denmark. So much of his growing up years were spent being quite alone. As he talked, he recounted many life points that contributed to his ability to deal with being alone. In assisted living, everyone is assigned a table for meals with the same people. Several of Ole's table mates have died since they began eating together. Then Ole said an interesting thing. He said, I'm not sure how to say this, but because I was a pastor, I became used to death. He spent time reflecting upon who he is and how he came to become his person. I asked him what daily things he does to stave off loneliness. He immediately shared that he does perhaps 4 crossword puzzles a day, reads a lot, although he has macular degeneration and one eye is basically useless, and then the coffee group. He has a friend, Nick, who picks him up each day and they go to coffee with the guys at McDonald's. So then I asked the big question. If you didn't have the coffee group, would you be lonely? He said, Good question. But he immediately began telling me about the many articles he had written over the years about some of the observations he'd made in life. They are now publishing them in the Decorah newspaper where he lives. He read one to me over the phone. It was about the concave steps in the old Winnesheek courthouse. He wrote about walking up those steps, looking at the concave indentations from years of wear, and imagined the mindsets of the souls who wore down those steps as they walked up to the courtroom to face whatever they had been charged with, or of the old people walking the steps wondering if they would have to relinquish their driver's license, or the judges in their flowing robes. When he finished reading, I said, Ole, I think you answered the question. I don't think you would be lonely without the coffee group at McDonald's because you would find conversations to have in your mind. After years of observing life and reflecting on it, you would be able to conjure up a whole imaginary coffee group, sharing conversations with them to occupy your mind and time. My sister Deb called and I recounted to her what I had learned from Ole. Deb said, I actually crave being alone, and that doesn't feel lonely to me. I said, Deb, that makes sense to me because it seems to me that you might be like Ole in that you have observed, been a voracious learner, and reflect for the meaning for hours on the things dancing in your mind. I was sharing this with our daughter, Maria, who is also in bed with migraines for days at a time. I asked her if she got lonely. She said that even though she does not enjoy being stuck in her bed because of her headaches, she has learned to be alone. She said, I had to learn to be my best friend. Wow. My 95-year-old mom said, if I have a book, I'm not alone. When we were first married, I'd stop in the house across the street up in our former neighbors, Evelyn and Ray's home, after teaching preschool. Ray had a detached retina in the late 1960s, which ended his farming and mechanic days. He spent most of his time in his recliner. Ray would rock his chair every day and he'd say to me, Christy, he's the only one I ever let call me Christy. He said, Christy, this retirement isn't what it's cracked up to be. Wow. After hearing him share that, his loneliness for something purposeful to do, something that would bring him joy or fulfillment, I vowed I would prepare myself so that later in my life, if my eyes went, I could do this. If my hearing went, I could do that. If my hands or feet went, I would be able to be prepared to do something else. If my mind went, I hope that I will be cute and happy. In May, the Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, released a Surgeon General advisory calling attention to the public health crisis of loneliness, isolation, and a lack of connection in our country. Could it be that though alone, Oli is not lonely because he has made an effort to keep connection with McDonald guys, and my sister and mom are able to connect with the characters found in their books that they read, and our daughters learn to appreciate the inner connection with herself? I have built into my life with intention, things that are proactive choices to live my days, whatever they may look like, with things that give me meaning and purpose no matter my physical condition. I think I'm writing this so we can all, as Oli said, be alone but not lonely. This week on your bathroom mirror, write, could I be alone but not lonely? Then go about deciding how you will answer that question. Join me next Monday for Live, Life Inspired Views for Every Day. I'm Chris Meyer, and I'm a curious soul.